Hello, and thank you for joining us at the Bloomberg Canadian Finance Conference. We are here to talk about the energy transition. And boy, we could not have picked a better time for a panel like this, right? We have a war in Ukraine that has sapped natural gas supplies, sent prices soaring, and created an energy crunch from Europe to Asia. We also have climate change, which has brought about extreme cold and extreme heat, testing power grids and pushing them to the brink of collapse from places like California to Texas. And on top of all of that, we have increasing volumes of renewable energy that have really exposed the vulnerabilities of grids to volatile energy supply. We are joined here by Eric Lachance, President and CEO of Énergir, and Vern Yu, the Chief Financial Officer of Enbridge, joining us to talk about how the recent events have shaped their view of what the future of our energy world looks like. Let's start with one big, broad question for both of you and get right into it. Tell me, what does your business look like in 10 years from now? And Vern, why don't we start with you and then we can come back to Eric.
Okay, well, I think what we've been trying to do broadly is invest in all forms of energy as we go along this transition. So today, we invest about 95% of our capital in conventional energy and perhaps 5 to 10% of our capital in renewables. But we've seen those investments go up over time as we've moved along the energy transition curve. And I think for context, we are a very large part of the North American infrastructure grid. So while the renewable percentage for us may look small, it is fairly sizable investment. We're making $4 billion of investment until 2025. So 10 years from now, I'm hopeful that we're spending somewhere around 20-25% of our total investment budget on renewables or other forms of energy transition, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's renewable natural gas, whether it's carbon capture and sequestration, or some other form of energy transition investment that's not known today.
That's a pretty aggressive percentage for a timeline like that. I would love to hear from Eric. What about your business? What do you see that looking like in 10 years from now?
Yeah, as a starting point, we're already about 50% electricity and 50% natural gas, so in about 50-50 between Quebec and the States. So for us on the electric side is really to try to accelerate the transition, the decarbonation, so leading the transformation. So we see actually more investment, but for enabling the electric network of tomorrow, which is going to be more interactive with the customers in terms of distributed generation and also more resilient given the challenges of climate change. On the natural gas distribution side, we're on the distribution side, so the way we see is that we're moving from a volume company to a value company. So we see a role for natural gas, but where it's going to be complementing the energy system and where there's going to be value. So we're moving from one product also to multiple products, such as renewable natural gas, dual energy offering, and obviously maintaining an eye on new technologies like hydrogen is also something that we're entertaining. So we see us increasing in terms of percentage of, let's call it carbon neutral energy that we deliver 10 years from now.
You know, you're mentioning a lot of technologies that require a lot of scale to get to, a lot of investment, and Vern, you as well, in terms of your investments. I mean, that's a lot of money we're talking about if we're going to be spending that much on energy transition so soon from now and even now. What do you need to see from government regulators and policymakers in order to really unlock those investments and feel comfortable making them? Vern, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I think for renewable natural gas, there's a strong desire for customers, commercial primarily, and industrial customers, to meet their own climate goals by subscribing to, for some of their energy to come in the form of renewable natural gas. That technology is relatively advanced. The only issue with renewable natural gas is you probably can't scale it to a size to make it meaningful for the overall energy mix here in North America. But we have about 10 landfill sites and farm agricultural sites that we're working on right now with partners to put that renewable natural gas into the grid. We serve all of the province of Ontario, so there's lots of different opportunities for us there. On hydrogen and putting hydrogen into the natural gas stream, I think that there is some technological issues that we have to work through. Lucky for us, we have such a large network that we're able to do pilot testing in certain jurisdictions where we have 2% of the energy stream in the city of Markham, Ontario, now being sourced by hydrogen. We're working to do that same thing in Hull, Quebec, where we're going to put 10% of the energy stream in the form of hydrogen. But there needs to be work done on how do we keep the hydrogen in the pipelines to make sure that things don't go wrong from a safety perspective. And then finally, with carbon capture, I think there's a lot of opportunities for Canada to decarbonize heavy industry through carbon capture. We've made great strides with the investment tax credit, but there needs to be clarity on carbon pricing in Canada and whether there's going to be a real fixed carbon price for abated emissions. And we've seen with the Interest Reduction Act in the United States, really good progress on how that country is going to deal with carbon prices, and the Q45 is really going to accelerate investment in carbon capture. But in Canada, for us to get some of these early stage projects off the ground, we're going to have to do something similar. So that's I think we're very close, but there are still some impediments.
Eric, how about you? What would you like to see?
Yeah, I agree with what Vern said. And if I can add also, I think the visibility and the previsibility in terms of regulatory and government aspect is very important and key. And the other thing that we've been advocating for is really to take a societal view of the decisions we're making rather than trying to look at it as energy by energy, but really trying to see which energy is more suited to particular needs, and not start with a bias, which nowadays is a lot around electricity, but rather have a neutral start point of view. And the other thing I would mention is on the regulatory side, as regulated entities, most of the work right now is more done in terms of economic regulation. And I think while it was appropriate at the time, I think now what we need to have is, again, having more of that 360 view that a regulator could have in terms of making sure that the right energy is used at the right place, and probably spend less time on economic regulation, but more in terms of more integrated resource planning, actually.
Great. Well, we talked a lot about renewable natural gas and a lot about hydrogen, which begs the question of what the role of conventional natural gas plays in the future. And you hinted at that a bit, Eric. Why don't you tell us what you see as the role of conventional natural gas in the coming years?
Yeah. First, I will state that it's going to be different depending on the geographies that you are. So we're in Quebec. Obviously, Quebec is well endowed in terms of hydraulic electricity power. So the dynamic is quite different that you would find elsewhere. So in our case, really, when we look at the Quebec market, we see a smaller role in terms of volumes for natural gas. But that being said, this gas is going to become more and more renewable and is even abated in terms of emission with carbon capture or even other means. But when we look at it, though, the value of the network for us becomes extremely valuable because of the work that the gaseous energy can do that the electricity is less suited to do. So for us, it's really trying to move the business model from trying to sell as much gas volumes that we used to do in the past to actually having the volumes decrease where it makes sense and maybe go to hydrogen, go to renewable gas, go to electricity in some cases, but really maintain the viability of the infrastructure because it brings value where the electricity cannot simply do, at least economically speaking.
Vern, what is your view on that?
Oh, Eric's got a great point that it is geographic and how natural gas gets used. I think if you look at it from 100,000 feet and look at it from a global scale, natural gas can make probably the biggest contribution to global GHG reduction in the next 10 to 15 years. If we can find a way to reduce the burning of coal globally and have more people use natural gas, we can make a very significant reduction in global GHGs. If you come back to North America and certain jurisdictions where you're just not able to electrify the natural gas electrify space heating, natural gas is really the only solution. So like if you use the province of Ontario as an example, on a peak winter day when it's extremely cold, the province uses more energy in the form of natural gas than it does electricity. In fact, it's 3 times the electrical generating capacity of the province. So practically speaking, you can't really electrify the province of Ontario. There's really no way to triple the power generation grid there. So it's a complex issue. It varies from geographic location, but natural gas is a very important part of the energy mix as we look forward into the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Thank you for that. And Eric, you alluded to this earlier when you were talking about natural gas, which is pipelines, and what we do with the pipelines that are already existing, because it's such a challenge at this point to build new ones. What do we do with our pipeline system as it is going into the future?
Well, building again on what was previously said, while we believe that there's going to be less natural gas, there's going to be a need for certain usage where there's value for that natural gas. So keeping the infrastructure is key. And as you mentioned, it's not only natural gas infrastructure that is being tough to build, but it's actually any kind of new infrastructure now that is very tough to build. So the value of those assets that we have and the importance of maintaining them is really important. So every new initiatives that we launch, we have in mind as to make sure that the economic value that the infrastructure is bringing is well reflected in the products that we are offering, so that we can maintain that infrastructure in the futures and that it can play its role within the energy portfolio of the provinces that we are in.
And Vern, how about you? How do you see the role of the pipelines changing over time?
Well, maybe to start with, we're the largest pipeline company probably in the world, where we move 20% of all of the natural gas in North America and 25% of all the crude in North America. So we have pipelines in 41 states and 9 provinces in Canada. And Eric's absolutely right. You can't build any kind of infrastructure, whether it's an electrical transmission line, whether it's a wind farm or solar farm, a pipeline, or pretty much anything else related to energy in a timely fashion. So this existing infrastructure will be needed for decades. It may change a little bit. A great example is on natural gas pipelines. There might be hydrogen as part of that fuel mix in the natural gas pipelines as we go forward. Certain oil and gas pipelines may be converted to carbon pipelines. So there's lots of need for infrastructure. And the reality is, in today's permitting world, even new green pipelines cannot be built in a timely fashion. So we have to use this existing infrastructure. We'll have to repurpose it. We've seen this happen in our industry several times over the last 100 years, where we used to move coal, gas in pipelines for people's homes. Now we're moving natural gas. In the future, I see a a mixture of renewable natural gas, hydrogen, and natural gas being moved in those pipes. So it's not like we haven't seen energy transitions before. It's just this one is just coming to us now.
Right. Well, we talked a lot about how your existing operations actually position you well for the future. And yet a lot of ESG investors or ESG minded investors would look at your company, Vern, and think you're an oil and gas company, uninvestable for me because of ESG. What is it that investors misunderstand about your business, Vern? What would you like to set the record straight on?
Well, I think from an ESG perspective, we're actually one of the highest ESG ranked companies in North America in the energy space. And the reason for that is that we believe in the energy transition. We have been in the renewables business for over 20 years. We are one of the 15 largest renewable power generators on this continent as well. But oftentimes people just focus on the fact that we move a tremendous amount of hydrocarbons. The fact is we have concrete scope 1 and 2 emission reduction goals. We have concrete diversity and inclusion goals. We are leading edge as far as stakeholder relations with right-of-way owners, indigenous tribes, and anyone else along the areas where we work. So all of these things go into the mix of how ESG investors look at us. I think with the recent energy crisis, there has been a slight change where over the last several years, investors have been predominantly focused on climate. But today, I think there is more of a balance between focusing on energy cost, energy reliability, energy security, and climate. So it's not that we have to do not do only one of these things. We need to do all of these things in a comprehensive way.
In the same vein, Eric, tell us about the challenges that your company faces in planning and raising capital for the investments that are necessary to bring about a transition.
Yeah, I think we're fortunate that in terms of currently, when we look at the capital providers, they have a long-term view and they have objectives that are challenging, but at the same time, they're more the school of if you want to change things, you work with the companies and also you provide them with the capital that's going to be needed to make that transition. In my sense, I know that there's a lot of push for exclusion in terms of capital and saying that, you should not lend or you should not invest into, but we've looked at, if you look at tobacco, which has been the case where it's been excluded for a long time, I mean, these companies are still doing very well and so on. So to me, it's more making sure that actually move into the impact, make sure that you have a board that is challenging the management. And if management is not doing the job, use the strengths of capitalism to actually make them move in the right direction. But honestly, like I said, we're fortunate. We have long-term investors that are not in that mindset. And obviously we're moving. So it goes both ways.
You're drawing interesting comparisons here through industries. So we only have a minute left here, and I like ending with a lightning round of questions, ones that you don't have to think too hard on, and your quick responses, honest responses are always the most fun ones anyway. We'll start with Eric. What is your favorite movie?
I would say Army of 12 Monkeys.
12 Monkeys. I like that one too. Vern, the last book you read?
I just finished The Candy House by Jennifer Egan last night.
Did you like it?
Excellent book. She won a Pulitzer Prize for a prior book. Excellent writer.
All right, I'll have to buy it. Eric, the car you drive?
Polestar 2.
All right. And Vern, the longest bike ride you've ever done?
I can't remember in my life, but this year the longest bike ride I've done is 138 kilometers with 2,000 meters of climbing.
Yeah, you wouldn't. You will never see me do something like that. Speaking of which, Eric, the longest bike ride you've done?
It's probably 70 kilometers, I would say.
Okay, all right, not bad. And uh, Vern, the year you think Enbridge will generate more profit from alternative energy than oil and gas?
I would guess 2050.
2050. Okay. And Eric, carbon capture pipeline. I mean, a pipe dream or the future of energy?
I would say it's going to be part of the solution. It's not one energy that's going to win it all, but it's going to be part of the portfolio.
Okay. Vern, the price of oil, let's say WTI, next year.
I'm bullish on oil. I'm going to say $100.
All right. And Eric, the price of natural gas this winter.
This winter, tell me the weather and I'll tell you, but it's going to be extremely volatile. So I'll say between 7 and 9 likely.
Okay. I think we've run out of time here. I thought I was going to get through 10 lightning round questions, but I really appreciate everyone joining in for this conversation. It was a really enlightening one. Thank you to Vern and Eric for participating in this panel.